What I'm going to share with you today is BlueCat's new Terraform Provider. This is a form of infrastructure as code, reducing redundancy in the types of things you build out and being able to version control certain kinds of infrastructure. Let's jump into a demo here. So I'm going to do an example of base level configuration for BlueCat Address Manager. So I'm going to define a number of different things and I'm going to put them into a greenfield configuration. So in this case, I'm allowing myself to define my configuration name. I have a number of blocks for the 1918 space here defined as well. I also have a number of regional blocks. In addition to that, I also have an Amazon set of blocks, and I have a bunch of offices for my England block. Now, this is one way of declaring it here. I'm putting it as a bunch of variables. This could be fed in as a file, a CSV, or similar, and updated and managed in version control. So you can see there, I have those are my variables, and then this is what does all the work. This actually builds out all that stuff. So it builds out the configuration, it builds out the blocks, and it builds out the networks. Now these have a dependency tree that I can declare here where you can see that my RFC 1918 blocks are dependent on the configuration record already existing. So if I actually run this now, I'll go ahead and do a Terraform Apply with auto approve, and my configuration name will be production. This will generate a pretty large list of changes it'll make. In this case, this is creation, so it'll do a lot of creation of objects. You can see there we had 42 objects added. Now let's take a look at what we created in the address manager. So I will go ahead and take a look at the configuration here. I have my production configuration. And if I look at my IP space, I have my RFC 1918 space defined. And within that, I have all these defined as well. Now, I didn't go and declare each of these one by one. I took that list of IP addresses and CIDRs and names, and I looped over it to declare it. So rather than having to do each individual declaration in my file, it went through and did them all at once. You can see here, I also have my AWS block with a couple of my regions defined. And within my United Kingdom block, I have a number of my offices declared as well. Now, there's a couple different things this is helpful for, because if I wanted to add something, it wouldn't be extremely difficult. Also, if there's configuration drift, I would be able to know that. Let's just say I have to make sure I keep my naming conventions in order, but somebody decides to come in here and change this. So someone decides that they're just gonna change the name of this particular office here to their initials or something. Now this could be applied to settings as well, but we're going to use names for simplicity. So you can see there, I've changed the name. It's no longer what it originally was. Now, if I go ahead and I reapply that file, it'll be able to detect that change and be able to revert it. You can see here, we have one modification made. If I refresh here, it's been restored. So this is very helpful at keeping your base level configurations, detecting drift, and being able to modify them back to what they originally were. Names are a simple example, but things like settings and properties are very important to keep in line. Also, if you decide one day you have a change you need to make to everything, being able to change that in one place, one file, and reapplying it is much more powerful. So let's do another example here. Let's say we have a particular country, in this case France, that wants to manage their own offices from a separate file. They have their own configurations, they have their own list of things, and they want to be able to manage that. They could actually manage that from their own file set, from their own version control. Sometimes regulations require this type of thing where configuration is managed differently in different countries. So in this example, we're just defining into existence a number of different offices, and then we're just going to create those. So we'll apply this to the France block, which, as you remember from our previous example, is currently empty. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply that right now. So you can see here, I went ahead and created 9 resources. Let's look at those resources in Address Manager now. If I refresh my France block, you can see they're now created. So you can also see how easy it is if I want to add an additional office. If I'm the person managing the infrastructure for France, I can go ahead and go back to my file here and add an additional office. So go ahead, and we're actually going to add, let's pretend we open an additional Paris office. Paris office number 2. All right, we've saved that. Oh, better make sure to update the thing here. So we decided at 10.1.13, CIDR 24 will be the second Paris office. So you can see if I apply my changes now, it'll be able to see what has changed. In the case of several of them, they already exist, so it doesn't do anything, and then it creates my additional. So you can see there it created my new network. And if I go ahead and go back here and refresh this, I have my second Paris office added. All right, so let's do another example. A very common case that we see here at BlueCat is where infrastructure is built out in AWS or a similar cloud. And the result of this is there's a bunch of IP addresses, networks, and host records that are created. And there are many different ways you can attack this in order to be able to get it into Address Manager. One would be our Cloud Discovery product. Another would be is on creation, you're also pushing the same information to BlueCat. So in this case, imagine you have used the Terraform Provider for AWS, and the result of that is something very similar to what you see here. You have a number of IP addresses and a number of host records. And you want this information pushed into Address Manager as a part of that initial build out. So what we can do is we can actually take that information. So here I've just written it out, but that might be a dynamic bit of information that's generated from Amazon. You have that information and you pass it into our provider to go ahead and create as well. So in this case, I'm just creating a network, I'm creating host records and IP address allocations. So let's go ahead and apply this. So in this case, I'm actually going to remove my auto approve so you can see what it looks like when it generates a list of changes and then asks me to confirm. So you can see here, it's letting me know a number of things are going to be created. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And so you can see here is we have a number of creations that have occurred. And now if I jump over to my Address Manager and I dive into the AWS block, US East 2, I have the network from my business app. So that could obviously be whatever your application is. And I have a number of records and IP allocations now, so I could go ahead and resolve to these immediately. You can define a list of addresses and names each individually and then have one place where you define the properties for those and be able to apply that. If you need to change one property for all those networks, you can apply it again and it will make just that change. That's BlueCat's Terraform Provider. Visit bluecatnetworks.com to learn more.